The invasion begins. The Elysian threat. The Elysian Empire destroyed our colonies, slaughtered our civilians, and now converged on Earth. But the war criminal Jackson had the nerve to warn us that we started it. U.S. Indomitable, a battle-hardened warship of the Earth Defense Fleet, floated in the void of Alpha Centauri, its weapons trained on an Elysian dreadnought, an alien monstrosity bristling with cannons. On the bridge, Captain Joseph Powell gripped his command console as he glared at the angular features of the enemy vessel on the view screen. The first strike. "Captain, the dreadnought is powering up weapons and deploying fighters," reported Commander Mail Petro, Powell's XO. Alerts flashed red around the bridge. "Sound general quarters. Power up railguns and load all missile tubes," Powell barked. Crew members rushed to battle stations as klaxons blared. A comm officer called out, "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Command. The Elysian Empire has declared total war. They claim border disputes give them the right." Border disputes, Powell spat. They'd mean the refugee ships they attacked without warning. A desperate battle. The dreadnought unleashed a salvo of searing beams that slammed into the Indomitable's armor. The human ship shook. Indomitable's railguns hurled kinetic slugs at the enemy. Missile contrails streaked from its launch tubes. Explosions blossomed along the dreadnought's hull. The dreadnought's shield shimmered as it fired again. Consoles on Indomitable's bridge exploded in showers of sparks. Smoke filled the air as damage reports flooded in. "Keep firing. Target their engines." Powell gripped the arms of his seat as the ship rocked. Indomitable's weapons pounded the dreadnought. Armor plates shattered off its hull. Suddenly, its engines flared and it turned to flee. Powell allowed himself a tight smile before a new alert chimed. The enemy's warning. "Captain Powell," a cold voice crackled over the comm. "I am Jackson, Supreme Commander of the Elysian Military." Jackson's cruel face filled the view screen. Pale skin stretched over sharp bones. His eyes were pits of darkness. "Your species' pathetic border incursions have tested our patience for the last time. This is your first and final warning. Your worlds will burn. Your people will kneel before the might of the Empire or be destroyed utterly." "Listen close, you arrogant prick," Powell snarled. "Humanity will never kneel. You've just picked a fight with the most stubborn sons of bitches in the galaxy. So do your worst. It won't be enough. We'll blast you to hell first." Powell cut the transmission. He turned to his battle-weary crew. "Plot a course for Earth. We need to get this intel back. The fight for our survival, for our very existence, has just begun, and by God, we will win it." The Council's decision. Return to Earth. The U.S.'s Indomitable streaked through hyperspace, racing back to Earth after the confrontation with Jackson's dreadnought. Powell paced the bridge, his mind churning with the implications of the Elysian leader's threat. Earth had to be warned, and quickly. As soon as the ship dropped out of hyperspace near Earth, a priority message from Earth Defense Command flashed on the view screen. A secret meeting. "Captain Powell, you are to report immediately to a top-secret council meeting at these coordinates. Highest urgency." Powell raised an eyebrow, but complied. He shuttled down to the secure facility, entering a dimly lit room where grim-faced admirals and generals sat around a large holotable. Admiral Blackwell, the head of the Earth Defense Fleet, stood. "The Elysian invasion plan. Captain, we'll cut to the chase. Our intel indicates the Elysians are massing an enormous invasion fleet in Sirius aimed straight at Earth." The holotable lit up, displaying the Sirius system swarming with red Elysian ships. Powell's blood ran cold at the sheer numbers. "We need to hit them first," Blackwell said. "Catch them with their pants down before they strike us. You're our best. We're sending you." Assembling the team. Powell nodded grimly. "I'll need a team, the best of the best. Whoever you want. Get it done, Powell." Powell strode from the room, already assembling the team in his mind. At the top of that list was his old friend and rival, Major Jack Maverick Reese, a hotshot pilot with an attitude but the best in the business. For this mission, Powell needed the best: training and intel. As the team came together, training intensely, a new piece of intel arrived that changed the game. The Elysians had spies in their midst, deep in the Earth defense fleet itself. It meant their mission, their target, was compromised from the start. Powell gathered his team. "We're going to use this. We feed the spies false information, make them think we're hitting the Elysian fleet at their supply lines, not their staging ground. When they move to protect their supplies, we'll hit the staging area and catch them out of position." It was a gamble, but it was the best shot they had. The stealth attack. Approaching the target. The U.S. Indomitable and its battle group set out, a massive and obvious target drawing attention. Meanwhile, Powell and his team followed in a stealth frigate, masked from Elysian sensors. They arrived in Sirius to find the Elysian fleet scattered and disarrayed, just as they'd hoped. The ruse had worked. Boarding the command ship. As the Indomitable and its fleet kept the Elysians occupied, Powell's team slipped aboard the command ship. They planted explosives at key structural points, sabotaged weapons and engines. They were on their way out when a figure stepped from the shadows. Admiral Jackson. His obsidian eyes locked on Powell. Confronting Jackson. "You?" Jackson sneered. "I knew you'd come. I knew you couldn't resist the chance to face me." Powell signaled his team to go on without him. This was between him and Jackson. The two rivals circled each other, fists clenched. "Do you think this is the end?" Jackson scoffed. "This is only the beginning of your destruction." He lunged at Powell, and the two titans clashed in a whirlwind of punches and kicks. They pummeled each other, snarling, trading blows heavy enough to crack bone. But Powell had the edge. He was younger, faster, and he was fighting for something greater than himself. Victory and escape. One final punch laid Jackson out, his face a bruised and bloody mess. Powell stood over his unconscious form, breathing hard. Then he turned and ran, sprinting for the hangar bay. It was a victory, a chance for Earth to catch its breath. But as the frigate raced towards home, Powell couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Jackson's words echoed in his mind. This was only the beginning. The defense of Arcadia. The Elysian retaliation. The victory at Sirius was short-lived. The Elysians struck back hard, raining destruction on human colonies. Distress calls flooded in from outposts being torn apart by enemy ships. Powell slammed a fist on his console. Set course for the Arcadia colony, maximum burn. The Indomitable leaped into hyperspace, the stars blurring past. They dropped out of FTL to chaos. Elysian ships swarmed the colony, blasting habitat and defense platforms. Escape shuttles tried to flee, only to be swatted down. A desperate stand. "All hands to battle stations," Powell roared. The Indomitable's railguns opened up, kinetic rounds ripping into Elysian hulls. Missiles spiraled out from launch tubes. The colony's orbital guns joined the fight, catching the Elysians in a crossfire. But the Elysians gave as good as they got. Plasma beams scythed across the Indomitable's shields. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Hull breaches vented atmosphere. "Damage report," Powell barked, gripping his seat as the ship shuddered. "Evacuating the colony." Powell gritted his teeth. The Elysians were too many. "Sir," Petro called out, "the colony's evacuating. Shuttles are launching." On screen, a cluster of shuttles raced away from the besieged colony, but Elysian ships were moving to intercept, weapons charging. Powell made the call. "Helm, put us between those shuttles and the Elysians. Draw their fire." Sacrifice and discovery. The Indomitable lurched as it took the hits meant for the shuttles. Its hull buckled and cracked. Fires raged through the ship. "Abandon ship," Powell ordered, his voice steady. "All hands to the escape pods." The bridge crew hesitated. Powell stood tall. "I'll keep her flying long enough for everyone to get clear." "Now go." "That's an order." One by one, they'd filed out. Powell took the helm, his hands flying over the controls. The Indomitable was dying around him, but he'd make her last stand count. He wove between the Elysian ships, the Indomitable's ruined hull drawing their attention away from the fleeing shuttles. There, an asteroid field. Powell plunged the Indomitable in, using the floating rocks as cover. The Elysians followed, their ships smashing against the asteroids as they tried to pursue. Powell's hands danced over the weapon's controls, making every shot count. Elysian ships bloomed into fireballs as he caught them against the rocks. But more kept coming, and the Indomitable was fading. Main power gone, life support failing. It was over. A crucial message. Suddenly, a transmission crackled through the static, an Elysian signal. Powell strained to listen, his eyes widening. They'd found something, an artifact, a weapon. The transmission cut out, but not before Powell caught the coordinates. With the last of his strength, he beamed a message to Earth Command. The coordinates, a warning. The Elysians could not be allowed to claim this prize. As the transmission died, so too did the last of the Indomitable systems. Powell slumped in his chair, his breath fogging in the cold. It was up to Earth now. He'd done all he could. His thoughts turned to his crew, to the colonies, to all of humanity. He could only hope it had been enough. The search for the artifact. The covered ops team. Earth Command leaped into action the moment Powell's transmission cut out. A covered ops team assembled in record time, the best of the best. Captain Marcus Holloway, a seasoned Spec Ops veteran, took point. His team was lean and lethal, a crackshot sniper, a demolitions expert, a close-quarters combat specialist. But for this op, they needed more than grunts. They needed brains. Enter Dr. Ethan Blackwell, the leading expert on xenoarchaeology. If anyone could make sense of alien chicken scratch, it was him. He was bookish, not a fighter, but he had guts. You had to dig up the kinds of things he did. The mission begins. Their ship, the Phantom, knifed through hyperspace, fast and silent. Every minute counted. The Elysians were already ahead in this race. They dropped out of FTL in high orbit over the planet, a rust-red globe pockmarked with impact craters. Scanners lit up with Elysian signatures. A base camp, heavy fortifications ringing what could only be the temple complex. They were dug in deep. A bold plan. The plan was simple, bold, and more than a little crazy. A diversion team would hit the Elysian perimeter, drawing attention. Meanwhile, Holloway and Dr. Blackwell would infiltrate the temple and secure the artifact. Get in, get out. Infiltrating the temple. Night fell over the alien world. The Phantom drifted down, silent running, hovering just above the rust-colored dirt. The team disembarked, fanning out into the darkness. The sniper found a vantage point on a ridge overlooking the camp. The demo expert rigged charges along the perimeter. Holloway, Blackwell, and the CQC specialist crept towards the temple. The assault begins. The charges detonated with a series of ear-splitting booms. Elysian soldiers scrambled, racing towards the explosions, gunfire erupting as the diversion team engaged. Laser blasts crisscrossed the night. Under the cover of chaos, Holloway's team slipped into the temple. The entryway was carved into the rock face, adorned with strange hieroglyphs. They pushed deeper, headlamps casting eerie shadows on the ancient walls. Discovering the artifact. Dr. Blackwell consulted his scanner. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's in here, it's powerful. They navigated a labyrinth of corridors, every turn revealing more incomprehensible carvings. Pressure plates and hidden switches threatened to trigger ancient traps. Dr. Blackwell worked frantically, deciphering clues to safe passage. And then they were in the central chamber, a vast space dominated by a towering statue of some alien deity. There, at its base, was a pulsing orb of energy, the artifact. A fierce battle. But they weren't alone. A squad of Elysian elites, led by a scared warrior, Commander Zane, Jackson's right hand. Holloway had tangled with him before. Bad blood ran deep. Laser fire filled the chamber as the two sides clashed. Holloway's team was outnumbered and outgunned. They took cover behind crumbling pillars, returning fire. The CQC specialist fell, a smoking hole in his chest. Holloway and Zane locked eyes across the chamber. A challenge passed between them. They surged forward, crashing together in a whirlwind of strikes and blocks. They traded bone-crunching blows, enmity fueling every punch. Zane gained the upper hand, driving Holloway to his knees. His gun was at Holloway's head, finger tightening on the trigger. A desperate victory. But Dr. Blackwell had reached the pedestal. With a shout of triumph, he cracked the final code. The orb flared, brilliant white, blinding. The ground quaked. When the light faded and their vision cleared, the Elysians were gone, vanished. Only Holloway and Dr. Blackwell remained, the orb pulsing gently between them. No time to question it. Alarms blared through the temple. The Elysians were coming back, fast. They grabbed the orb and ran, sprinting through the halls. They burst from the temple into the firefight outside, the diversion team fighting desperately to cover their escape. They piled into the Phantom, artifacts secured. The ship leaped into the sky, Elysian fire chasing it, but they were away, shooting into the stars. In the hold, the team caught their breath. Dr. Blackwell cradled the orb, eyes wide with wonder and fear. "I don't know," Dr. Blackwell admitted, "but whatever it is, we can't let the Elysians get their hands on it." The final battle. Powell's rescue. Adrift in the void, the Indomitable's wreckage tumbled through space. Within its battered hull, Captain Powell and his surviving crew clung to life, their breaths shallow in the thinning air. Hope faded with each passing hour. A flicker of light caught Powell's eye, a ship silhouetted against the stars. Not Elysian, human. A freighter. It moved alongside the Indomitable, docking clamps latching onto the ruined warship. Pressure equalized with a hiss as the airlock cycled open. The artifact's power. "Captain Powell," a voice crackled over the comm. "We're here to bring you home." Back on Earth, Holloway and his team marched into Secure Lab Alpha, the alien artifact suspended in a containment field at its center. Scientists swarmed over consoles, their faces bathed in the orb's eerie glow. Dr. Lena Sensen looked up from her workstation. "Captain Holloway, I was just about to call for you." Her eyes shone with excitement. "This artifact, it's more than we ever imagined." She tapped a screen, and a hologram bloomed to life. Star charts, planetary systems, swirling galaxies. A new threat. "It's a map," she breathed. "A map of an empire that once spanned the stars. The knowledge contained within this orb it's staggering." Alarms blared, red lights pulsing. Holloway's hand flew to his sidearm. Perimeter breach. A soldier's voice yelled over the comm. "Elysian forces incoming." The lab shook as explosions boomed overhead. Scientists scrambled for cover as Holloway's team took up defensive positions. The doors burst open. Elysian shock troopers pouring into the lab. Laser fire crisscrossed the room, searing into consoles and containment tanks. The arrival of Jackson. Holloway ducked behind an overturned table, his rifle barking. He tapped his comm. "Powell, you reading me? We need backup now." Across the complex, Powell snapped into action. Barely recovered from his ordeal, he nonetheless charged towards the fray, rallying security forces as he went. They hit the Elysians from the side, catching them in a withering crossfire. Powell and Holloway fought their way towards each other, their movements fluid and precise, honed by years of training and combat. The battle rages. Just like old times, Holloway grinned as they took cover behind a blast shield. Powell returned the grin. "Let's show these bastards what humans are made of." They surged forward, pressing the attack. The Elysians fell back, their advance blunted. But it was a feint. A blast ripped through the outer wall, and through the smoke strode a figure out of nightmares. Admiral Jackson, his face a mask of rage. Powell versus Jackson. "Powell," he roared, his voice dripping with malice. Powell's eyes narrowed. Holloway, hold the line. He stepped forward, squaring off against his nemesis. They clashed in the center of the lab, fists and feet blurring in a deadly dance. Around them, the battle raged, humans and Elysians locked in desperate combat. Jackson pressed his attack, driving Powell back. His fist found Powell's ribs. His knee drove into Powell's gut. Powell staggered, blood dripping from his mouth. Jackson loomed over him, triumph etched on his angular features.